Okay, so today we're going to do a filter change and we're going to empty out the ink tank. Filter's just held in by this strap here, nice and easy. We're going to detach from the bottom of the filter. We're going to detach the line coming off the filter. Got a small little tubing separator here. Just want to hold this ring down in place as you separate the line. Slides right out nice and easy. You can also do that with a screwdriver if you don't have the right tool. Now we're going to pull this out nice and easy. Careful we don't splatter a bunch of ink everywhere. Attach the other end of the filter, and then we remove. So next I'm just going to use a standard 1/4 inch piece of tubing. Put it right back in the output of the pump. And again, this tool is used to hold this ring up while you insert the tube for a firm connection. And again, you could use a screwdriver to hold that ring as well. Now we're just going to go ahead and pump the ink directly into a waste container. Okay, so we have our 1/4 inch tube connected, we have our waste container, and we can control how fast or how slow we're filling up here based on what pump speed we set it at. I'm on about 13 revolutions per second here. We can see how fast it's filling. Now where it's pulling the ink from in this ink tank is up front and to the outside, so when we get a little bit lower we should probably actually tilt the printer a little bit and get all the ink over to one side. But for now we'll just keep an eye on the fluid level as this rises. That's at about 20 RPSs, 22 RPSs. And there is a stop button, so when we get up nice and high we hit stop and the fluid transfer stops immediately. We'll get another waste container. Oh, I can hear it bubbling. So we drained out the majority of it. I'm going to tilt this guy over a little bit. And that's it. I've evacuated roughly 95% of the fluids in the system. By removing the filter for the filter change, you're removing quite a bit of the ink from the system. This is a good point to start if you wanted to do a flush as well. Okay, in the previous video we showed how to remove the main ink filter. We hooked up a standard 1/4 inch line and then we drained it into a waste container, getting the ink out of our ink tank. So now what I've done is I've just taken the other line, or rather the other end of the line that was in the waste container, and now I have it going right back in to the ink tank, and this is how we're going to begin our flush. So we're going to take some solvent, whatever the MEK or makeup equivalent is to your ink. As you can see, we're filling up our ink tank down here. You only need to use about a 1/2 quart or so for your first go around. And then the same rules are going to apply. We're just going to run the pump in manual mode so that we can run it through here and start flushing out our system. At about 15 RPSs, we can already see some fluid moving through here. There are some manual control functions up front for turning on certain solenoids. Basically what we would recommend is you turn on the viscometer solenoid, the printhead solenoid, and the bleed solenoid. These will allow fluids to move to the head and back to the viscometer and back to the ink tank. Alright, so now that I'm primed, I'm going to go ahead and bump up my pressure. I can bring it up as high as 40 psi. So now you can hear the motor kind of moving along there. Some fluid movement inside of our ink tank. Running at about 40 psi right now. It's around 29 revolutions per second, a little bit higher than it would normally run with ink in it, but because the medium or the makeup is so thin, that's the reason for that. Okay, so I'm going to open up a couple of the other solenoids that I mentioned, and we'll do the viscometer first. So the viscometer is constantly receiving ink through this purple line here, and it's bypassing and coming through this brown line to go back to the ink tank. When the viscometer begins to read or take a measurement, it opens up a solenoid back here and it fills up the viscometer, and then fluid comes out of the top of this viscometer and again returning it to the ink tank. So there's one fluid path to the viscometer, and there's two fluid paths coming back from the viscometer depending on which state the viscometer solenoid is in. Turn that off, and now I've got the printhead solenoid on, sending ink to the head.
Rolling.
Okay, so when we're going to run the pump in manual mode, we'll go to Service, Fluidic, and your Fluidic and Tools menus are not available unless the printhead is turned off. So once in Fluidic, you can see these 7 on-off fields are for solenoids, and then here's my pump speed here. So I'm going to bring my pump speed up. So depending on what operation you're doing, like if you're trying to drain it, you probably want your RPS to be a little lower because it can't get to pressure. And then when you're flushing it, you can bring it up to pressure because you have the bypass tube going back into the ink tank. So you can hear the motor ramping up. My pressure is right around 22. RPS is roughly the same. So again, because the fluid is thin, it runs at a higher pump speed to achieve the same pressure. So once I'm at pressure, I'm about 35 pounds there, so I can turn on my printhead, and it's going to drip out of the printhead. You can turn on the gutter if you'd like also, and it'll draw back from the printhead, so it depends on what you're trying to do. I typically don't turn on the gutter until I know I have fresh solvent out to the head. I don't want to ingest any more ink back to the ink tank. I want to get rid of the ink that's in the system. So got my printhead on, and then viscometer is the other one. We can cycle that on or off depending on which one of those two bypass tubes we want to flush out. When this viscometer solenoid is off, then the ink comes into the bottom of the viscometer, loops out of the bottom of the viscometer, and returns back to the ink tank. When the viscometer solenoid is on, then the ink is going into the bottom of the viscometer and coming out of the top of the viscometer. So it depends on which sort of operation you're trying to achieve there. So that's our pump speed. This is where our solenoids are. We can do bleed. That takes from instead of going out the nozzle, it actually takes it back from the nozzle. So that's another way to flush out a bypass line. You notice I did not turn on solvent, did not turn on flush, or tank solvent. I don't play with those three at all. You don't want to pull makeup from the makeup tank. We just want to put cleaner into the ink tank and flush out the system. All right, so I'm going to turn that bleed back off so I can send ink back out through or solvent back out through the nozzle.